Good morning and welcome everyone to today's webinar by thebusinessdesk.com in partnership with international law firm CMS. I'm Ben Ormsby, I'm the Yorkshire editor, and I'm joined by an expert panel today who'll be looking at the economic opportunities that a green industrial revolution brings. The North's economic history was forged in the Industrial Revolution, and the two have been inextricably linked ever since. But in the wake of Boris Johnson's recent announcement about a 10-point plan to support the Green Industrial Revolution and £12 billion of government investment, plus a government white paper yesterday on powering the net zero future, it feels like the time's right to be talking about what opportunities, well, the whole green revolution brings for the North as we look to recover from a COVID-19 pandemic that has, well, in some cases, decimated parts of our economy. So, as I mentioned, I'm joined by an expert panel. They include Dr. Annette Bramley, the director of the N8 Research Partnership, Andy Allen, who's the finance director for ITM Power, Torbjørg Klara Fossum, the vice president of global carbon capture storage solutions at Equinor, Miles Kitcher, the managing director of Peel Environmental, and Helen Boyle, the regional development manager at Cadent Gas. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to start with the biggie. What opportunities does the Industrial Revolution, the Green Industrial Revolution, present to the North's economy for rebuilding off the back of COVID-19? And I'm going to start with Andy, I think, first, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. I think the Northern Powerhouse can certainly be the industrial centre for the UK for the green revolution, and certainly be the manufacturing force that it was before. So for me, I see it as jobs. I also see it as us exporting product to the UK and beyond. I also see us utilising renewable power that is coming from offshore into particularly the Humber, and using that to decarbonise the area and the UK.
Fantastic. Same question then to you, Helen.
Yeah, thank you and good morning. Thank you for having me here. I mean, I think so I'm going to kind of talk particularly, I guess, in my role for looking after the Northwest and the West Midlands, and kind of similar really to what Andy's just said. The Northwest is identified as one of the super places in the 10-point plan that Boris Johnson recently put out, and we are, and I think actually for once, ironically, the North is ideally placed to actually be capitalising on building back better after COVID and the Green Industrial Revolution. So, and what we need to do is really be pulling together. This isn't a competition, or certainly I don't see it as a kind of competing, one area against another or one industrial cluster against another. It all needs to happen. It all needs to be decarbonised. It all the hydrogen clusters need to happen for the UK to reach the overall target of net zero. So what we need to be doing is to working out how best we can work together to actually capitalise on the opportunity that this presents.
Fantastic. Miles, again, your view on it?
Thank you and good morning, everybody. I think what strikes you when you read the Energy White Paper is that the range of actions that need to take place. So there's a lot of opportunities. There's going to be a lot of genuine change in the systems, which in themselves bring opportunity. And I totally support what Helen said, in that it's not about competing different parts of the North against each other. We do need to do it all. When you look at the map of where the clusters are in the UK across Northern England, you've got a huge amount of carbon intensive activity that needs to decarbonise, and with that there's clearly in a post-Brexit world a threat there, but there's also a huge opportunity, whether it be carbon capture and storage, whether it be hydrogen, whether it be EV, whether it be renewables. There's a whole range of activity that needs to take place, and we're ideally placed both geographically and geologically there to maximise the potential there. There's great opportunity.
Fantastic. And Annette?
So I don't want to repeat what's already been said. I think there's been some great point made. What I would say is that a green recovery plan properly implemented could generate huge economic and social value for the Northern Powerhouse. An LGA report recently puts job creation in the green economy at over 1 million by 2050. It's going to be one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing parts of the economy, not just in the UK, but globally over the next 30 years. And the Northern Powerhouse is the best place to lead this recovery in the UK, thanks to our science and research capabilities, our skills providers, our businesses, and our natural assets. We have already 35% of jobs of the UK in the low carbon goods and services sector, 50% of England's renewable energy and strengths in green technologies. And so we have enormous assets to forge a green recovery and putting the Northern Powerhouse at the forefront of the UK drive for net zero.
Fantastic. Well, one of the things that was mentioned during that was sort of the carbon intensive industries. And obviously, Torbjørg, your job title gives it away. You're heavily involved in that carbon capture world and in storage. So, you know, why is carbon capture and storage so important, and what's the process for it?
Yes, thank you, and also good morning to everyone. I think first of all, a little bit of high-level context for CCS, or carbon capture and storage. So it is kind of, if you look at all the scenarios that are consistent with a sustainable development, they indicate that CCS needs to contribute with gigatons of CO2 management every year in 2050. And CCS is one of the few options that can deliver emission reduction in hard to abate sectors while retaining high value industries. Also, one of the advantages with CCS is that it can enable production of large amount of what we call blue hydrogen. And blue hydrogen is a fuel that can serve as a fuel switch option for the energy intensive segments, and then, you know, allow a low carbon transition for a wide range of industries and also for heavy transport and power sectors. But to your question, what is CCS? And let me explain that simple for those of you who are not familiar with it. So CO2 is captured from a source. It could be from natural gas or from flue gas or even from the air before it is transported and injected into the ground in a deep well, several thousand meters into the ground. And if you think about pumping oil and gas out of a reservoir, CO2 storing is very much the same. It's just the other way around. We are pumping the CO2 into the reservoir, which has the same feature as has, you know, been keeping oil and gas trapped for millions of years. And it is a known technology. We have 20 CCS projects in operation on a world basis, not Equinor, but in the world there is. And in Equinor, we have more than 24 years of operational experience of storing CO2 at our fields, Sleipner and Snøhvit. So this has given us kind of a unique experience that we want to deploy in UK. And we know that CO2 transport and storage can be done in a safe and controlled manner. And also the North Sea storage capacity is huge. It's really an asset. So, and the storage capacity in UK is 80 gigaton. So that's really an asset, I would say. We are part of the Northern Endurance Partnership, which is about developing CO2 transport and storage solutions that can manage CO2 from both the Teesside and Humber clusters. And we are also developing CCS and hydrogen projects in Teesside and Humber. So I'll probably get the opportunity to go back to that later.
So that brings us on to a nice point that both you've mentioned, Torbjørg, but also Helen and Miles mentioned, is the opportunity of working together. Obviously, the climate emergency is something that is affecting everyone across the globe, but particularly in those areas where heavy industry takes place. So how important is it that we work together, and how are local authorities, the private sector, national government all coming together to do this? Because otherwise it feels it could be a very convoluted and complicated system. Who wants to go for it?
Well, I'll start that.
Oh, go on, Miles, go on.
No, you go, Helen. Helen, you go.
You sure?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that there are the industrial clusters that are happening at the moment, and I think local authorities have been setting some of them accelerated and quite ambitious timescales to achieve net zero. And as network operator, certainly for gas, for half of the network in the country, we're working with local authorities to help them understand and see what that transition may look like. And taking on board, working in that kind of whole systems approach with the distribution network operators for electricity as well. It's very, very important. So the point that I made earlier, not just about the industrial clusters working together, but also that whole system approach, the electricity and the gas infrastructure providers coming together with the new technology providers that, you know, we're kind of talking about this morning, to provide that solution for what is a really, really challenging target. But I think what has happened up until now is that really kind of the tails wag the dog a little bit, in the regions have set these accelerated timescales, and we've been waiting almost for government policy and government kind of indication around funding to catch up. And I think what I would say is it's not government money that's going to solve this, it's private investment. So what we've been waiting for really is the government to send those kind of signals to private sector to say, this is where we think this will go, and this is what we think will happen. And that's what's happened recently in the 10-point plan. And what we now expect is a similar thing to really what happened with offshore wind, was to set up the right structure, to set up the right kind of framework to enable private sector to help in this transition. So that's what I'm expecting to see next, I think. So Miles, sorry if you want to carry on.
I think, you know, from the Northwest perspective, we have seen a great coming together of, you know, 3 LEPs, 2 mayoral authorities, the local authorities and business working together to put a plan together around how the roadmap to decarbonisation, because it is a transitional activity. Things are going to change bit by bit, but we have to hit that goal. I think there is direct collaboration. I totally agree. There needs to be absolute clarity in government policy, and we're getting there actually. You know, yesterday's white paper isn't the be all and end all. There's still things to do. You know, the business case around hydrogen and CCS isn't there yet, but there's a recognition that we need to achieve those policy objectives and give clarity in regulation that then allows the private sector and the public sector to invest. I still think there's a long way to go, but I think we're in an improving environment around, because we haven't had a clear energy policy for decades, and we're seeing that now. And there is a change in the system, not just project delivery, but how the whole local networks work together. So yeah, there's a lot to do, but we're in a, you know, I'm optimistic.
Andy, you know, your ITM Power are one of those businesses that are delivering green tech and very much being, of the moment, being very successful. You know, how do they plan to grow that, and how closely are you watching those indicators from government about which avenue to follow?
Yeah, so ITM manufacture electrolyzers, which what is unique for ITM is that these respond very quickly to changes in power. So you can couple with renewable energy, either on the grid or directly to renewable power. And that creates you a hydrogen which could be green. And so what we've used national funding and support for is building partnerships and developing our product. And we've just moved into a large gigafactory, which is the only gigafactory in the UK for electrolysis equipment. So we've used national funding to get partnerships and to bring partners with us on a journey. As Miles said, it's not always the case that projects work economically first time out. And so we're getting partnerships, and then you see the need for local authority involvement, particularly around transport, to really change how we're thinking about it. And one of the projects we've got at the moment is a bus project in Birmingham, where Birmingham Council have committed to fuel cell electric vehicles, fuel cell electric buses, and then you start to see these pilot schemes popping up around the country.
Fantastic. Annette?
Yeah, so I feel that partnership in net zero is absolutely crucial. This is a global challenge that we are facing. No one business, no one university, no one has the solution on their own. And it was great to hear Miles and Helen both referred to the systems approaches that are needed, which speak to partnerships. Systems themselves are made up of lots of different actors, lots of different organizations, and so partnerships across these systems are really needed. I just highlight as well that, well, we've spent quite a lot of time talking about energy today. Reaching net zero does cross into lots of different business sectors, and there are lots of opportunities out there for all sorts of companies. One of the systems that we're looking at as the N8 is around our land use and how we manage our land for net zero by reducing emissions and increasing carbon sinks. So thinking about how we manage our natural assets, that includes tree planting, but also by other remediation activities, and that has knock-on effects around flooding and mitigating the impacts of climate change. So as well as our energy needs, there are other systems that we need to think about and act on for support of net zero in partnership together.
Thanks, Annette. Just a quick one to the audience. If you have any questions for our panel, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and I will put them to them. But you've all talked about the business case and the opportunities for investment. We know that the government has pledged this 12 billion pounds. Do you think there could be any issues on attracting particularly international investment as we enter a new year where Brexit will have happened one way or another, deal, no deal, however it plays out? And I know that's a difficult one. Obviously, Torbjørg, do you have any view on the international investment, whether the UK will remain attractive to that?
So I think my view is that private investors are happy to support as long as there is long-term government ambitions and stability and return on investment. And my main thing is domestic policy consistency. I think that Brexit creates some unknowns, but this happened a lot in policies, and UK government seems committed to their green agenda regardless, and that's also why we are in UK and we are in the north of England, not by chance, because we have all these elements here. So yeah, that's my view on that.
Anyone else have a view on whether the UK's attractiveness for international investment might change? Annette?
So I don't want to talk too much about Brexit because it will happen and we will live with that. But I think, as Torbjørg said, that businesses will make decisions based on the assets that they see in places, the expertise and the skills and the workforces that they see in places, and the government can create the conditions for companies, whether they're inward investment or based within the UK already, to invest. It's going to be a huge global market, and if we can capitalise and put those conditions in place early on, we'll be well placed in the north to capture a good share of that market, which will help drive the recovery that we need from COVID.
I think it's a resilient sector, and I think there's the way global market and global investments moving towards low carbon and sustainability and ESG principles, that actually the money is looking for places to invest, and stable domestic policy replacing the EU carbon trading with a UK system gives that certainty. So I don't actually think this is a sector that there'll be detailed issues, but where Brexit has a huge impact.
I can see you nodding along, Helen. Have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I would completely agree with what everyone said. It's very difficult to tell, but I think this is a problem, a nut that has to be cracked. So then Brexit's not going to stop that overall, and I would agree really that the policy direction from the government has, particularly recently, got a lot more aggressive. So that kind of signalling to the private sector, and that kind of the long-term investment opportunities that we're talking about here and the returns that are possible. you know, that's not going to change. I think, as Miles has said, some of the detail may get a bit annoying, but I think in terms of the general direction, that's not going to change. So I'd hope that in terms of attracting investment, whether it's from the UK or whether it's from Europe or wider, that's unaffected.
So it was mentioned briefly earlier when we were focusing on the power part of the UK has become a world leader in wind power. How do we make sure we're a world leader in other parts of that green industrial revolution, you know, in that wider green tech, I guess? Andy, you've touched on the fact you've got a gigafactory, which is a number that blows my mind slightly, in Sheffield. You know, how important is that for you to start looking at how to export that technology overseas?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we see a good chunk of our market as being export, but that capacity allows us to fulfill a lot of the ambition here in the UK as well. How does that keep us? How do we stay ahead of the curve and make sure that you know, we're important? Well, I think the funding we're getting for research development for the core product development still supports us staying ahead of the curve. There's also a stamp which says made in Sheffield, which is actually really important for people who are looking for quality products. And so actually there's a lot of things about the standards that we set ourselves here in the UK as manufacturers that is really important. So people aren't just looking for the very cheapest technology electrolyzers, they're looking for something that they can rely on and that's going to give them a very high level of availability and support for what will ultimately be essential industrial processes as our kit gets deployed, for instance, in refineries and stuff like that. So it's imperative that we continue on the product development journey and the cost reduction journey, but it's also really important that we keep the standards very high, which we do in the UK.
So we've had a couple of questions come in. So one has come from John, who said that sustainability can surely not be achieved as long as we imagine that growth isn't a necessity for business and the overall economy. How do the panel anticipate that we will move towards a balanced economy, and what will we perhaps sacrifice in order to get to zero or net zero? Anyone got a thought on that? Or do you think it is a growth versus zero carbon, or can the two come together as we seem to all hope they can?
I think the two do come together. I don't think you can. I think people's lives will change, but I don't like the word thinking we're going to sacrifice things. We're going to the way we get around the country will change. We'll be in electric vehicles. Will be, you know, things will change. But I think the aim should be to not decoupling, should I say, negative emissions from economic growth, and we should see both. I think it's not a case of sacrificing or not doing things. Our lives will just change slightly because as they have done all through history. You know, we evolve as a society, and we'll continue to evolve into a low carbon, zero carbon society in 2050. But that doesn't mean abandoning economic principles or economic goals. It's really important we don't actually. It's really important we don't actually see a loss of jobs. You know, we can decarbonize overnight by closing our industries down, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about moving industry forward into a new low carbon world and keeping jobs and you know, doing things differently. So no, I'd see both go hand in hand for the time being.
Fantastic. Well, that sort of leads us on to another question from Christian for Torbjørg. A lot of people have pointed out to the fact that carbon capture takes away a company's effort and commitment to perhaps very challenging decarbonisation plans. What is the role of carbon capture in reaching net zero and ensuring that industry does become more sustainable and not just use it as a way to, you know, feel they don't have to focus on their sustainability agenda?
Well, I think that it is widely recognized that for some industries, there is no other options than CCS to decarbonize and to be part of the low carbon society. And if you look at the industries of cement and steel, it's hard to foresee a future without those industries. And with CCS and also with hydrogen, you have kind of a transition option, so that you allow industries to transit to low carbon, and then also with that retaining the jobs and the industries. So I think that's very important. And perhaps maybe I can give an example from the Zero Carbon Humber partnership that we are part of. So we've been in this partnership, we have been submitting a competition, a bid in this ISEF competition, which is about to conclude these days. And this is a competition about receiving co-funding from government on pre-feed and feed studies. And in this partnership, we have kind of we've developed two main elements. One is a low carbon infrastructure across the Humber area, and the other one is what we call the H2H Salton project, which is an anchor project. It's about producing a large-scale blue hydrogen, and that is also the anchor project for this low carbon infrastructure. And the progress, if we progress on this scope, together with also, of course, progress on business models in UK, we believe that there's a lot of low carbon projects across the wider Humber that will be unlocked and really facilitate the low carbon transition for industry by having the possibility to connect to hydrogen infrastructure for fuel switching to a clean fuel, or to the CO2 infrastructure for capturing emission and bringing that to that infrastructure. So I think I think there's no silver bullet solutions to reach the targets. We really need all solutions that can contribute.
Which again, another question from an anonymous attendee. What are the panel's thoughts on a pan-northern approach to energy? Again, we've sort of talked that regions are focusing themselves on their own net zero targets. Everyone's got a slightly different one and slightly different plans. You know, what could the benefits be of a pan-northern one, and do we think that would be the right approach rather than individuals?
I guess I would say, from my perspective on the N8 Research Partnership, we are a pan-northern organisation. That you have to do what's right in place, but there are benefits for joining up across the whole of the region and sharing knowledge and understanding, not duplicating things that are going on. As we've already alluded to, we need to work in partnership to crack this climate change problem together, and together we can move further and we can move faster in this space. I think that we could waste a lot of time, energy and resource in competing against each other when we actually will be better off directing that effort against the challenge of climate change.
Well, that brings on to a nice one. What more do we need to do to make sure that everyone is more joined up? You know, when we've got innovative companies perhaps in one part of the country who are doing something which could benefit a local authority in another part, with private sector investment that might not be based there. How do we go about joining that up, or is that a challenge that might be too big and need a whole session in its own right?
I don't think there's a huge issue. I think there is general liaison between the different areas and companies. Clearly, you know, there's a lot of large companies involved in a number of clusters. It's not as if there's really these sort of tight clusters that aren't talking to the outside world. There is, and business generally will want to work with where it can work. So, you know, I'm sure Andy will be happy working anywhere if he's buying electrolyzers often. So I don't think there's a huge issue. I don't see a need for an entity that goes across the north that looks after energy. I think we've got clear policy drivers. The different regions and different authorities will understandably adopt slightly different policies, and quite often the local economy and geography is very different, and you know, where there might be a big opportunity for Mersey around tidal, where you don't get that in Teesside or whatever. But so there's going to be different solutions, but I think generally speaking there's a reasonable level of cooperation.
Sorry, but can I just add to that? Yeah. I mean, I would completely agree with that point. I think there is kind of coordination and sharing, and I think what we've heard this morning is that willingness for everyone to come together and to get behind this, what even from a 2050 target is a challenge, but you will get some regions who are able to go faster. Now, whether that's to do with, you know, their local economy or their geology or their skills or whatever it is. So we work very closely with Greater Manchester, with the distribution network operator. Now we're doing a very similar thing in the Liverpool City region, which is where HyNet, the consortium, are looking at production and supply of hydrogen, initially blue hydrogen in that area, that's going to help to decarbonise the northwest. But from a challenge perspective, they're very, very different, even though they're next door to each other. You know, they're a few miles apart, but from the kind of the nitty gritty of the challenge in each of the areas, it's very different. So you have to work at that local level, but some areas will be able to go faster than the 2050 target, and should, so that actual overall 2050 target is achieved across the board. But I think you do get this cooperation. So at Cadent, we're working with other gas network operators on projects across the country, looking at the different challenges, improving hydrogen. So we've got HyDeploy at Kiel that's looking at blending for over a year now 20% hydrogen into the gas mains, and there are other projects that we're collaborating with other network operators on across the country, looking at whether that's eventually 100% into the network, and different types of makeup of geographic areas. Is it a bit more commercial? Is it residential customers? All of that has to be proved and looked at, and all that collaboration is already going on.
Perhaps I could also add a little bit here. I think this collaboration is really essential, because we need everybody to pull in the same direction. It's industry, it's energy companies, it's citizens, it's finance communities and governments. So this is so essential, and this is something we all need to work hard on, to engage with others. And I think perhaps I could share a little bit of learning from Longship project in Norway, or the Northern Lights project. I'm not sure if you've heard about that, but that is a CCS value chain that we develop in Norway. And I think we are, I mean, the industries have made investment decision, and the government is about to announce anytime soon. But I think one of the important learnings from Northern Lights is the importance of collaboration and trust across industry and across government. It has really been fundamental, because I think these first of a kind projects, they are not only about developing a project, they are also about developing and testing regulatory and commercial framework, and develop business model for scale up, and really about building a new industry. So I mean, these first of a kind projects that we have to develop now, it's not traditional project development. It's strategic and bold decisions from all parties, and it's really about partnership and collaboration. So I think that is really key.
That leads me on to another nice question of, obviously there's things we can learn from our international neighbours. Perhaps obviously what Torbjørg was talking about there with the Northern Light project, but are there any other areas or markets that we should be that businesses should be looking to for that inspiration, and to perhaps see how best practice can be formed, or could we be at the cutting edge of this and therefore the one that everyone looks towards?
I think there's an awful lot of good practice coming out of the UK. You know, there's a lot of, you know, HyNet's incredible project that's, you know, I think probably world leading. But there's always the opportunity to learn from overseas, and actually making those international links again, I think is really important for the UK. And certainly as the clusters develop, you know, making those links not just between themselves, but within international markets, both from a sales perspective of selling ideas and expertise overseas, but also learning from you. There's something that I can't remember the fact now, but you know, over last year, China have installed so many hydrogen refueling stations, and so there are parts of the world that are just getting on with it and doing things. So we should always be open to looking around the globe at where best practice does occur, but with the aim to have best practice coming out of the UK and be seen as a market leader.
I fully agree with that, and certainly there really is an opportunity to sell to the world as well as within the UK. ITM have taken investment from Germany and from Italy with industrial partners in the last sort of 18 months over 2 rounds, and really that's because people have seen what we're doing and can buy into that. But every country has their own climate change agenda, and a lot of them are publishing roadmaps, which the UK are doing their hydrogen roadmap actually at Q1 next year. So very much we can lead, and not just in the UK, but globally.
That's always, it's always a nice one to hear. Sorry, Torbjørg.
I just wanted to add also a few reflections. I think that UK with its policy is really leading the way. So I think many will learn from UK and from the north. And I think actually with this policy, UK will position itself with competitive advantage for these low carbon solutions that the world will need. But of course, there is also always learning for UK to build on. And perhaps since I'm from Norway, I could point to, the only 2 CCS projects in operation is Sleipner and Snøhvit in Europe. And why is that? And that was really because the Norwegian government made some bold and clear decisions back in the 1991, where they decided to launch CO2 taxes to incentivize emission reduction. So this led to Sleipner CCS project in 1996 and later Snøhvit. And it has really led to Norway being one of the most important frontrunners on CCS. And that's why we are in UK today. That's why we are in the north of England today, because we have the competence. And that is because the Norwegian government made some bold and strategic decisions, I would say, back in time there. And now we have the launch of the Longship and Northern Lights project, and the government is again, together with industry, showing appetite to take these bold and strategic decisions that are kind of really shaping the future. And I think that is really key. And to make this happen, we really need, the good dialogue, the openness, and the collaboration between industry and government that we have been talking about. But also government and industry need to see the need, and they need to see the long-term value in creating these industries. And I think, and Equinor think that this is exactly the track that UK is on now.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because as we've said, the UK's timescale is towards 2050. The North City regions are much shorter than that in some cases. Some looking at within a decade or so. Obviously, what does that look like in terms of in 10 years' time? How realistic is it that we could be net zero? And what are those changes that people might need to make and embrace? And how do we raise that awareness outside of perhaps events like this, where you need the mass populace to move with it? Annette?
So I think one of the things that is desperately needed in this space is work around skills and lifelong learning. I think there are huge opportunities within these sectors, but in order to be able to embrace those changes, we will need to have people who've had the opportunity to become educated and aware in the need for net zero, right from kind of school level, but more practically from levels 3 and higher, in the further education and higher education space. I think there needs to be opportunities for people coming out of carbon intensive businesses to upskill or relearn new and really be able to kind of position themselves for these great new opportunities in these expanding sectors, which will really help. And again, that having that skilled workforce, skilled population in the north of England will really make us attractive for business investment.
I think, sorry, I was just going to add to that, Ben. I think one of the things we haven't touched on this morning is the consumer and the customer element of the challenge in this. So one of the thorniest areas to decarbonize is heat in people's homes, because the challenge in that involves a consumer making a choice over a technology, unless it's going to be mandated or unless it's going to be paid for by government, which seems unlikely, or private investment in some kind of different business model. There is an element of a customer sitting in their home and looking at their heating system and realizing, and 85% of the UK have their homes heated by gas at the moment, natural gas at the moment. So what will the world look like over the next 20 years or so when it comes to heating in domestic settings, and what part does that customer play in making that happen? So my concern is that awareness of the net zero challenge, it's quite low among consumers. What it means for them, what can they do at the minute, what choices can they make, because this is a transition, it's not something that happens overnight. What will network operators and governments do for them, but what is it that ultimately they have to do in terms of their homes, from a energy efficiency, insulation investment, and we haven't really touched on that very much this morning, and ultimately replacing their heating system with a low carbon version. That's an enormous challenge, and is one that's very interesting to see how all that plays out. And I think again goes back to this idea around everybody coming together and collaborating. But what I'd like to see more of, I think, is consumer awareness of net zero, because I think we need them involved in the challenge, a bit like what happened, I suppose, with plastics. So I'd like to see something happening really around that wider net zero and a sustainability challenge. Although I think consumers know about sustainability, less so about net zero.
I think that's a really, really important point, Helen. I think one of the big tasks ahead of us is to educate and engage with the public around CCS and hydrogen technologies. You know, the broader community needs to get familiar with these solutions as an example. So we really need the public to understand and be as comfortable with these technologies as they are with renewables and with heating their homes with natural gas today and fueling their car with petrol. So I think you're pointing to a big task ahead of us that is really important.
Certainly having COP26 in Glasgow next year in 2021 is a massive opportunity for raising the awareness. It's a great hook to be able to hang some of that awareness building around. So I really hope that we're, as a whole, able to take advantage of that as an opportunity.
So I'll go back again to that to the question I asked slightly rephrase it as the last question of the session as we're coming to a close. Is it achievable for the North and some of the North City regions to be achieving net zero within the next 10, 15 years? And if not, what can industry help step up to innovate and deliver that?
I think they are. I think it's great that some city regions have set really ambitious timescales, because I think that's how overall decarbonisation will happen. So you've got to have a target to aim to strive for everything else to kind of coalesce and fall into place behind it, including that investment. And what you've already heard this morning is that you've got all different sectors that are coming together to help to achieve that aim. I hope that it's reached. I think everyone is working on the basis that that's what they're doing. We're supporting the networks that we cover and look after, and the Northwest and the Liverpool City regions have timescales of 2038 and 2040, which are ambitious, not quite kind of the 10 years ahead, but still very, very ambitious for those large areas. And we're working and coming together and taking that whole systems view and helping them to understand what is achievable and what they can do, and what are the areas that are still they need to attract investment for, or they need to innovate to make happen. So I think it's right. I think it's great that they do that, because I think that's how overall decarbonisation will happen.
I think generally I'm positive that we will achieve, because the concerns are, though, That's being positive and negative, but I think the concern is affordability going forward. We are going to go into a difficult economic period, you know, post-COVID, post-Brexit. People have got lots of going on in their lives. They will have an even more going on in their lives. So just it's taking everyone along and ensuring we aren't creating more fuel poverty, or we are decarbonising it in a really measured way that's bringing everyone along, and it's not just because the heating your house is the big one. You know, that is the huge area of and that's why projects like HyNet, where you decarbonise without actually customer realising. And I know some people say, well, that's not a good thing because it's not raising awareness, but there's a balance between a lot of actions. I think we'll get there. I do think we'll get there. I think it won't be easy, and there's going to be some challenges, and we are going to have to make some, you know, changes to around the systems, and there's a lot to do. But I just, you know, they came through the white paper again. There's a positive stuff around, you know, transition and jobs and benefits, and there's quite a big bit on affordability, and we shouldn't forget that.
I think that actually brings us to a close. So I'd first like to thank all our panelists for today's discussion. It certainly feels like the ambition is there and the opportunity is there. So potentially net zero could be one of those fantastic economic booms that will help position the North ready for an exciting future. So thank you again, and thank you very much to CMS for sponsoring this session. There will be a write-up available on thebusinessdesk.com in the coming days, along with a video of this session. And this is forming part of a wider project alongside CMS on the whole Net Zero North agenda. So thank you again, and I hope you all have a lovely day. Cheers.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks. Bye.